Sometimes, the loudest transformation is the one no one hears, except the angels. There is a kind of woman who doesn't force her way through the world. She doesn't manipulate outcomes or beg for attention. Yet somehow, life opens for her. People are drawn to her presence, not because she performs, but because she is aligned. She is not always the loudest in the room, but she is the most rooted. And what surrounds her is not just admiration, it is protection. It is presence. It is what many of us forget to notice in our fast-moving lives, divine support born from deep stillness. In Eastern philosophy, it is taught that the quiet heart becomes the dwelling place of heavenly forces. And modern neuroscience agrees. When the nervous system is regulated, when the brain enters coherence, we enter a state where insight, intuition, and clarity arrive. It is not fantasy, it is physiology. It is not magic, it is maturity. And that woman you see walking with grace through adversity, holding dignity in her silence, she is not alone. She is surrounded, not by crowds, but by calm, not by applause, but by angels. A woman who learns to align herself with silence becomes a force that the world cannot ignore. In a culture that praises constant activity, visible success, and loud affirmation, the woman who chooses quiet strength seems almost invisible at first. Yet those who observe closely begin to sense something different about her. Not because she is doing more, but because she is doing less, and doing it with presence, with intention, with inner alignment. Silence is often misunderstood. People assume it is the absence of sound, the lack of expression, or a sign of weakness. But silence, when practiced with awareness, becomes a kind of power that transcends language. It becomes a living vibration, a state of coherence, an energy field that cannot be touched, yet deeply felt. For the woman surrounded by this kind of stillness, the silence is not empty. It is full of guidance. It is full of truth. And in that truth, she begins to realize she is never alone. Consider a woman sitting by herself in a crowded place, a train station, a cafe, or a room full of people talking. She says nothing, but her posture is composed, her face relaxed, her breath calm. You can feel that she is not trying to be noticed, but somehow you notice her, not because of what she wears or says, but because of the peace that seems to ripple outward from her presence. That peace is not accidental. It is earned. It is cultivated. It is the result of choices she has made, quiet internal decisions to no longer be at war with herself. From a neuroscience perspective, the human brain is constantly scanning the environment for safety or threat. This function, known as neuroception, explains why some people make us feel anxious and others make us feel calm, even without a single word being exchanged. The woman who is aligned in silence has regulated her nervous system. Her breath no longer races. Her thoughts no longer spiral. She has built a sanctuary within herself, and the brain of everyone around her can sense it. This is why silence attracts angels, because it represents order, clarity, and truth. And this truth is not rigid, it is alive. It flows like water around resistance. It doesn't fight the world, it understands the world, and more importantly, it understands itself. In relationships, especially intimate ones, this form of silent alignment is one of the most powerful tools a woman can carry. Because relationships are not built only through words. They are built through energy, through rhythm, through emotional signals that are often unspoken. When a woman is silent, not from suppression, but from intention, she begins to hear the subtle movements in her relationship. She hears what is not being said. She observes the patterns. She recognizes the difference between love and attachment, between connection and control. There is a story of a woman named Lena. She had been in a relationship for several years with a man who loved her, but whose love was often chaotic. He would speak passionately one moment and withdraw the next. Lena, like many, thought her job was to keep the connection alive, to fix things, to explain herself, to fight for the relationship. But the more she did, the more exhausted she became, until one day she stopped speaking. Not in bitterness, not in silence as a weapon, but in silence as a surrender. She stopped trying to control the rhythm of the relationship and instead began listening to the rhythm of herself. She started waking up earlier, sitting with her tea, without checking her phone. She started writing in her journal before responding to emotional messages. She started observing rather than reacting, and slowly something shifted. The man she was with began to feel her presence more deeply than ever before, because she was no longer trying to be heard, she was simply being. The relationship either had to meet her in that space of quiet truth or fall away. And over time, it did fall away. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she stopped abandoning herself. In that silence, Lena didn't lose anything. She gained everything: clarity, freedom, a sense of herself that no longer depended on another person's opinion or attention. And as she rebuilt her life with this centered energy, she noticed something else. New connections entered her life. People who were aligned with her values, friends who didn't drain her, opportunities that matched her quiet discipline. And yes, love, but this time it felt peaceful. Not because it was perfect, but because she no longer needed to force it. This kind of silence, the silence of inner alignment, becomes magnetic. It becomes protection. It becomes clarity. And in the language of the unseen, this clarity draws invisible support. Whether you call it divine guidance, intuition, angels, or simply grace, something begins to move around you when you begin to move inward. Eastern traditions often speak of the concept of wei, the art of non-forcing. It is not passivity, but effortless action. It is the understanding that right timing, right presence, and right energy often do more than aggressive effort ever could. The woman who understands this principle lives in alignment with the flow of life. She does not beg. She does not chase. She aligns. And what is aligned with her will come. Western psychology mirrors this wisdom. The theory of self-determination, for example, explains that people flourish when they live from intrinsic motivation, when their actions are driven by internal values rather than external approval. The woman who practices silent alignment is living from her core, not her ego. And in doing so, she becomes trustworthy. Others may not always agree with her, but they feel her clarity. They sense that she is not pretending, and this authenticity becomes her greatest form of influence. There is another woman, an older woman named Farida, who lived alone for many years after raising her children and losing her husband. To the outside world, her life seemed quiet, unremarkable. But those who met her often left with a strange sense of calm. She spoke softly, but when she did speak, her words were deliberate. She had no time for gossip, for complaints, or for superficial drama. Instead, she moved slowly through life, watering her plants with reverence, making tea with patience, praying without performance. She laughed often, but never too loud. Her presence was her power. Young women in the community often came to her, not because she offered solutions, but because being near her reminded them of something they had forgotten, the power of being centered. They would ask her for advice, and she would often respond with a question. "What does your breath tell you?" she would ask. Or, "What are you carrying that isn't yours?" She lived by one principle: what is in harmony will remain. What is not will dissolve. And so she never forced anyone to stay in her life. She didn't argue to prove her point. She listened more than she spoke. And yet, those who met her never forgot her, because the peace she carried was not from the world. It was from within. This is what it means to be surrounded by angels. It is not necessarily a mystical experience. It is the result of living in such a way that you invite clarity, purity, and stillness into your daily life. The angels are metaphors for forces that protect you. Your wisdom, your intuition, your alignment with truth. And yes, perhaps even something more, but they do not come to the loud and scattered. They come to the woman who has emptied herself of noise. That woman may still feel pain. She may still feel loss. She may still cry at night, but she no longer feels lost because she has found a deeper home, a home that cannot be taken by disappointment, betrayal, or confusion. Her silence is no longer a prison. It is a sanctuary. People often misunderstand her. Some may think she is too serious. Others may say she is too distant. But what they cannot deny is the presence she brings. A grounded, serene, unwavering energy that offers stability in a world that spins too fast. And in time, they begin to respect her, not because she demands it, but because she embodies it. And that respect doesn't just come from others. It comes from life itself. Life begins to open where she once struggled. The right people arrive. The wrong ones leave without conflict. Doors open, not all at once, but quietly, like the morning sun touching the earth after a long night. She has become a magnet for alignment, not because she chased it, but because she became it. In practical terms, cultivating this kind of silent alignment means making small daily choices that anchor you in your own truth. It means waking up and choosing mindfulness over distraction. It means learning to respond rather than react. It means observing your thoughts before they become your words. It means protecting your peace as if it was sacred. Because it is. You don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need everyone to agree with you. What you need is to be congruent with yourself. And when you are, you will begin to feel the presence of something greater moving with you. It might not make sense to others. It might not even make sense to you at times, but you will feel the protection, the clarity, and the strength that come when your soul stops chasing and starts aligning. You will walk differently, speak differently, love differently, not because you're trying to impress, but because you're no longer trying to survive. You are living fully, quietly, powerfully, and in that quiet power, you will find yourself surrounded, not by crowds, not by noise, but by a stillness so complete it begins to echo in everything you touch. And in that echo, there is guidance. In that silence, there is love, not always loud, but always true. There is a silent language spoken long before words are ever formed. It is felt in glances, in gestures, in the pauses between sentences. It is the language of energy, and a woman who begins to understand this language realizes something profound. Her emotional field speaks louder than her voice ever could. Her energy precedes her presence. It walks into rooms before she does. It lingers long after she has gone. This understanding is not just spiritual, it is biological. The human brain is wired to detect emotion through microsignals, tone of voice, facial tension, and posture. Even a newborn baby, without a single word, can feel the emotional tone of its caregiver. It's why we instinctively step back from someone whose energy feels hostile, even if their words are polite. It's why we lean toward those who feel open, calm, and genuine, even if they speak very little. Energy does not lie, and the woman who begins to take responsibility for her emotional energy stops trying to control the external. She knows that how she feels, her inner landscape, will eventually shape the landscape around her. When she walks into a space carrying anxiety, unresolved pain, or emotional chaos, it will ripple outward. And when she walks into that same space carrying clarity, forgiveness, and stillness, something shifts. People soften, tensions drop, and hearts open without knowing why. One of the most powerful things a woman can do is become aware of what she is radiating, not just what she is saying. Emotional energy is a signal, and like any signal, it either attracts or repels. If a woman is constantly carrying fear of abandonment, it won't matter how many affirmations she repeats or how much she wants love. That fear will color every interaction, subtly at first, then more obviously. She might cling, over-explain, or read too deeply into silence. She might expect rejection and unconsciously create situations that confirm it. It's not because she is broken, it's because her emotional frequency is tuned to fear. But when a woman starts doing the inner work to clear that frequency, to release what is not hers, to stop carrying guilt that doesn't belong to her, to stop defining herself through wounds that haven't been healed, her energy changes. She no longer enters relationships needing proof that she is lovable. She already knows she is. And that knowing becomes magnetic. There was once a woman named Clara who had spent most of her life in relationships that were imbalanced. She was always giving, always available, always pouring herself into others. And yet, she kept ending up with partners who withdrew emotionally, who didn't reciprocate her efforts, or who took her for granted. She began to believe that maybe she wasn't enough, that maybe love just wasn't meant for her, until one day, after a particularly painful breakup, she stopped asking why others couldn't love her and began asking a different question. What is it in me that keeps choosing this pattern? Clara didn't run to fix it. She didn't jump into the next relationship. She sat in her discomfort. She started meditating, not to escape, but to observe. She began to notice that she often felt anxious when someone didn't reply immediately, that her body would tense when she sensed emotional distance, that she would overcompensate by being extra nice, just to avoid being rejected. She realized that she wasn't showing up in relationships as her full self. She was showing up as someone hoping to be accepted. So Clara changed her focus. Instead of trying to be chosen, she chose herself. She stopped responding immediately to emotional triggers and started breathing through them. She started asking herself, is this anxiety mine, or is it an old wound speaking? And with time, her energy began to shift. She stopped needing people to prove their love because she had already validated her own worth. When she eventually entered a new relationship, it was not with desperation, it was with presence. And her partner, unlike the ones before, responded differently. He felt her groundedness. He felt that she didn't need him to fix anything in her. And because she wasn't seeking to be saved, she attracted someone who came to build, not rescue. That's what happens when a woman's emotional field becomes clear. She no longer attracts through pain. She attracts through peace. Energy is subtle, but it's not mysterious. It's built from habit, from daily practices, from moment-by-moment decisions. When you hold resentment, it settles into your posture. When you live in fear, it shows up in your tone. When you doubt yourself, it echoes in your words. But the reverse is also true. When you choose integrity, your presence becomes trustworthy. When you cultivate self-respect, your energy commands healthy boundaries. When you align with honesty, even your silence becomes powerful. In relationships, especially romantic ones, this emotional field becomes the foundation. Words may start the connection, but energy maintains it. People can only connect with what you reveal emotionally. And if your emotional field is guarded, anxious or reactive, even if you are physically present, you will feel emotionally distant. There's a quote that says, "You attract what you are, not what you want." This doesn't mean you must be perfect to receive love. It means that your emotional reality shapes what feels familiar to you. If chaos feels normal, you may unconsciously feel bored in peace. If validation feels like survival, you may confuse attention with intimacy. But when you begin to elevate your emotional energy, you begin to normalize peace. You begin to feel safe in slowness, in presence, in honesty. This emotional maturity requires discipline. Not the discipline of suppression, but the discipline of awareness. It means catching yourself before projecting your pain. It means recognizing that not every emotion is an instruction. Sometimes you feel abandoned, not because the other person left, but because you are touching an old scar. Sometimes you feel disrespected, not because someone insulted you, but because you haven't fully honored yourself. There's a woman named Merel who once said, "I used to think healing meant becoming soft, but it made me fierce. Not because I became louder, but because I became clearer." Clarity is not about certainty. It's about alignment, and emotional energy becomes clear when it is aligned with truth. That truth may be painful, but it frees you. It may be uncomfortable, but it protects you. And from that space, your presence becomes different. People often sense your energy before they understand your words. They feel your self-trust in the way you hold eye contact. They feel your peace in the way you speak without rushing. They feel your groundedness when you say no without guilt. And those who are not ready for that kind of presence may pull away. But those who are aligned will feel drawn, not to your beauty, not to your charm, but to your essence. This is why cultivating your emotional energy is one of the most powerful forms of relationship preparation, because it sets the tone. It creates safety, not just for others, but for yourself. You no longer live in emotional reactivity. You begin to respond, not from wounds, but from wisdom. And that wisdom changes everything. It changes how you speak, less impulsively, more intentionally. It changes how you listen, not to react, but to understand. It changes how you love, not to possess, but to witness. And slowly, your emotional energy becomes a healing field, not just for yourself, but for others. You begin to notice that people open up around you, not because you ask the right questions, but because your presence feels safe. You begin to attract honesty, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. You begin to experience connection, not based on performance, but based on resonance. And resonance is key. Two instruments tuned to the same frequency will vibrate together even when only one is played. This is resonance, and the same is true in human relationships. When your emotional field is aligned, you begin to resonate with others who share that alignment. You no longer chase connection, you become connection. In ancient traditions, it was believed that certain people carried such purity of heart that the unseen would gather near them. Their energy was so clear, their intentions so aligned that they became channels for divine presence. Whether or not you believe in the mystical, the metaphor remains powerful. The cleaner your emotional energy, the more deeply supported you feel, not just by people, but by life itself. Your life begins to mirror your frequency. Chaos will no longer feel like home. You will find peace not in retreating from the world, but in participating with intention. You will stop seeking to be seen and begin choosing to be felt. Because when your emotional energy speaks, before you do, what it says determines everything that follows. A woman's life changes the moment she realizes that discipline is not punishment. It is permission. Permission to create space. Permission to invite clarity. Permission to summon what is sacred and remove what is not. And in this way, discipline is not a cold command. It becomes a divine invitation. Because the presence of order within her life sends a signal not only to the physical world, but to the unseen. Angels do not dwell in chaos. They gather where harmony is nurtured. They surround those who walk in quiet alignment, with their inner and outer life matching. When a woman wakes each day without intention, her life is left vulnerable to the noise and demands of everything outside herself. But when she wakes with a centered heart, with habits rooted in purpose, her life begins to form a rhythm, a sacred architecture that protects her energy and invites wisdom. And in that structure, in that discipline, she begins to feel the unseen support that always existed but was previously hidden beneath distraction. Many people view discipline as something masculine, aggressive, or forceful. But true discipline is not harsh, it is compassionate. It is the loving structure you build to keep yourself aligned with what matters most. Think of a river. Without its banks, it becomes a flood. With boundaries, with shape, it becomes a force that gives life. In the same way, a woman's energy becomes powerful not when it flows freely in all directions, but when it is focused, directed, and held in integrity. In relationships, this kind of inner discipline becomes the silent force that shapes respect, desire, and connection. A woman who does not have order in her own life will depend on others to provide it. She may expect her partner to be the ground beneath her feet because she has not yet built it within herself. But a woman who lives in order, who has rituals that restore her, who honors her own time, body, and space, she does not lean to survive. She leans to share. She gives from fullness, not from lack. There's a woman named Lena who spent most of her 20s in a whirlwind of romance and emotional highs and lows. She was passionate, deeply loving, and intuitive, but her life was disorganized. She would sleep at odd hours, forget appointments, jump from one emotional state to another, and often let her partner's mood dictate her own. She mistook spontaneity for freedom and avoided structure because it felt like control. But over time, she began to feel a quiet exhaustion. Her relationships lacked stability. Her sense of self wavered. And though she gave love freely, it was rarely returned with the depth she desired. One morning, after yet another emotional night of confusion and unmet expectations, Lena sat in her room, tired not just in her body, but in her soul. She looked around and noticed the clutter, not just physical, but mental. Her phone was filled with unanswered messages. Her to-do list had turned into a source of anxiety. Her mind raced with thoughts that led nowhere, and for the first time, she admitted to herself the love she wanted to receive from others was the love she had not yet given to herself in structure and care. From that day, she didn't make grand declarations. She made small, disciplined choices. She began waking at the same time each day, not out of rigidity, but out of reverence for the morning silence. She started writing her thoughts each evening, not to analyze, but to listen to herself. She deleted the numbers of people who only reached out when it was convenient. She began to eat with intention, speak with more awareness, and protect her alone time like sacred ground. And what happened was not dramatic, but it was profound. Over time, Lena began to feel more rooted. She stopped seeking approval. She didn't need to be constantly reassured. When a man entered her life who lacked direction, she could feel it immediately, not as judgment, but as clarity. She no longer tried to fix him or adapt to his inconsistencies. She simply continued her rhythm, and if he aligned, he stayed. If not, he left. Either way, she remained in peace. This is the quiet strength of discipline. It clears the space for truth to enter. It says to the world, I am not waiting for someone to save me. I have already begun building a life I respect. From the outside, such discipline may seem small. A woman folding her clothes carefully, lighting a candle before meditation, saying no to an invitation that would drain her. But these actions are declarations. Each one sends a signal to the unseen. I am ready to receive only what matches my inner harmony. In many ancient traditions, the home was considered a sacred temple, and the care with which it was maintained reflected the care within the soul. The woman who maintains her inner and outer space with respect is creating a vibration that does not need to be announced. It is felt. The way she prepares her meals, the way she walks into a room, the way she guards her attention. These are not chores. They are rituals of power. Modern psychology has long recognized the impact of habits on emotional well-being. Small daily rituals help regulate the nervous system, reduce anxiety, and increase a sense of control. A woman who implements consistent structure, waking rituals, reflective practices, nourishing routines, builds not only discipline but emotional resilience. She is less likely to react impulsively. She is more grounded in her choices, and in relationships, this makes her magnetic. Not because she plays games, but because her self-respect is evident. Men, too, sense this difference. A woman who disciplines herself emotionally does not chase, does not cling, does not collapse when ignored. She feels the loss, but she does not lose herself. She grieves with dignity. She walks away with clarity. She communicates with intention, not desperation. And this level of inner stability challenges others to rise or to fall away. There was a story once told of a woman who lived in a small village, known not for her beauty, wealth, or status, but for the peace that surrounded her. Every day at dawn, she would walk to the river with a small clay pot and fill it with water for her family. She took her time. She walked slowly, greeting the morning sun, barefoot on the grass. The children in the village watched her in awe. Not because she was doing anything spectacular, but because everything she did had rhythm, grace, and care. One day, a visitor to the village asked, "Why do people speak of her as if she was surrounded by angels?" An elder replied, "Because she lives in such a way that even the invisible wishes to dwell near her." This is what discipline creates. A field so ordered, so intentional, that the chaos of the world cannot find a place to live there. It creates a kind of spiritual hygiene. Just as we bathe the body to remove dirt, we discipline the mind to remove confusion. We discipline the heart to remove bitterness. We discipline our time to remove distractions. And in that cleansing, in that quiet structure, we make space, not just for peace, but for presence. When a woman builds this kind of life, she no longer fears solitude. She embraces it. She no longer fears rejection. She respects it because her validation is not built on others staying. It is built on her own staying power, her ability to remain true to herself even when others misunderstand her. This kind of woman does not need to argue her worth. She does not convince. She does not compete. She aligns. And alignment is not loud. It is consistent. She continues her rituals even when no one is watching. She honors her time even when it's inconvenient. She chooses quality over quantity in every area: her food, her friendships, her conversations. And in relationships, she becomes the kind of partner that doesn't just love deeply. She loves wisely. She doesn't wait to be chosen. She chooses, and not based on appearance or charm, but based on character, consistency, and shared values. Her heart is open, but her standards are clear. This is the woman who is no longer at war with herself. Her past may not be perfect. Her journey may be filled with detours, but she has arrived at a place where her inner world and outer life no longer contradict each other. She is not pretending. She is not performing. She is living, and in that living, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to mirror her discipline. Opportunities align. Connections deepen. Confusion fades, and while others may chase miracles, she becomes one. Simply by the way she moves through the world with grounded grace. It is not the size of her actions, but the sincerity of them. It is not the speed of her journey, but the stillness with which she takes each step. And the world notices. The right people notice. Life itself notices. Because the universe does not respond to chaos. It responds to clarity. And clarity is born through discipline. Not rigid, not harsh, but sacred, loving. A devotion to order that opens a path not just for personal success, but for spiritual alignment, emotional peace, and relational truth. There is a quiet form of strength in a woman who no longer needs to explain herself. A woman who has realized that her love is not a currency to be bartered for bare minimum attention. She no longer performs emotional acrobatics just to be seen, to be heard, or to be held. This woman has understood one of the most liberating truths in relationships. When love must constantly be proven to someone who keeps shifting the goalpost, it's not love, it's negotiation. And love, in its truest form, doesn't require proof. It recognizes presence. It's one thing to desire intimacy and companionship, but it's another to lose your voice trying to earn a seat at a table that demands silence as the price of admission. Women are not born to shrink themselves into roles that were never written for them. And yet, many do. For years, for decades. They twist and fold their personalities into boxes, hoping that by becoming what he wants, they will be loved. But in doing so, they slowly vanish from the relationship and often from themselves. A woman in love can be patient. Remarkably so. She can wait while he finds himself. She can wait while he figures it out. And she can even wait while he breaks her heart piece by piece in the name of confusion or trauma. But there comes a moment when the soul tires, not dramatically, not angrily, but silently. A quiet breaking that doesn't announce its arrival, a shift in her spirit when she realizes she deserves more than half-hearted promises and emotionally stingy gestures. This kind of realization is often born not from confrontation, but from observation. She watches, she listens, she pays attention to the words he says and how rarely they align with his actions. She notices the gap between how he shows up when he wants something and how absent he becomes when she needs something. And in that gap, a new awareness is born, not of who he is, but of who she has become in trying to keep him. Imagine a woman who has always been the nurturer, the fixer, the forgiver, the one who sends the good morning texts, who checks if he's eaten, who keeps the connection alive, even when it's draining her. She does it because she believes in love, in commitment, in the potential she sees in him. But one morning, she looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize the reflection. Her eyes are tired. Her smile is polite but hollow. Her joy, once abundant, now flickers like a dying candle. And in that moment, she asks herself, when did I stop living for myself? That question is the beginning of her return. It's not a rebellion. It's not a threat. It's a reawakening. The journey from self-abandonment to self-recognition is not loud. It's not a sudden declaration of independence. It's subtle. It's the pause before replying to his text. It's the decision to stop explaining why she's upset because she realizes he already knows. He just doesn't care enough to change. It's in choosing silence over begging and distance over desperation. You see, love cannot be begged for. Affection cannot be negotiated. Respect cannot be extracted from someone who sees your value only when you walk away. A woman who keeps returning to emotional breadcrumbs eventually realizes she's starving in a relationship where she was meant to thrive. She starts to pull her energy back, not to manipulate, not to provoke, but to preserve. Because once a woman understands that she is not responsible for another adult's emotional maturity, something powerful shifts. She stops over-explaining. She stops accepting apologies that are followed by repeated patterns. She stops filling the silence with hope and starts filling her life with peace. This is not coldness. This is clarity. And clarity is what fuels her transformation. She no longer entertains potential. She aligns with presence. She no longer invests in fantasies. She builds with reality. Her boundaries stop being theoretical and become embodied. She no longer says, I deserve better. She becomes the kind of woman who attracts better by refusing anything less. Real love isn't about staying through torment to prove loyalty. It's not about enduring pain in the name of patience. It's about being seen, held, chosen consistently. Not perfectly, but honestly. Let's talk about consistency for a moment. Consistency is not about grand romantic gestures on anniversaries. It's not about sporadic moments of charm followed by weeks of emotional neglect. Consistency is in the daily effort. It's in checking in. It's in remembering small things that matter to her. It's in making her feel emotionally safe, not occasionally, but always. Many women fall in love with men who are intense but inconsistent. These men know how to spark desire, but don't know how to sustain commitment. They say the right things, but they never do the hard things. They disappear when emotions get deep and return when they sense you're moving on. These men aren't offering love. They're offering confusion wrapped in charm. But a woman who has done the work on herself can see through that. She no longer confuses intensity with intimacy. She no longer finds chaos exciting. She no longer entertains people who are emotionally allergic to accountability. She understands now that the right person won't trigger her survival instincts. He will bring peace, not perform emotional gymnastics. One woman shared her story of how she gave everything to a man who only loved her when she was easy to love. The moment she had needs, emotions, or expectations, he labeled her too much. So she made herself smaller. She cried less, asked for less. She even convinced herself that being low maintenance made her more lovable. Until one day, she realized she had become invisible in a relationship that was supposed to be mutual. The day she stopped chasing him was not the day she stopped loving him. It was the day she started loving herself more. It wasn't anger that made her walk away. It was exhaustion. She was tired of explaining, tired of waiting, tired of proving. She realized she wasn't asking for too much. She was just asking the wrong person. This kind of woman isn't bitter. She's just better now. Better at recognizing her worth. Better at walking away when actions don't match words. Better at loving without losing herself in the process. And that's what shifts the dynamic entirely. When a woman no longer fears being alone, she becomes powerful beyond measure. She no longer tolerates half, loves, or emotional crumbs. She no longer gives access to her sacred space to people who don't bring reverence and consistency. Some men only love women who doubt themselves, because a woman unsure of her worth is easier to manipulate. But the moment she steps into her clarity, into her confidence, he becomes uncomfortable. Not because she changed, but because she remembered who she was before she made him her world. This remembering is sacred. It is not about arrogance. It is not about revenge. It is about reclamation, reclaiming her voice, her boundaries, her joy, her peace. There's a quote that says, "She remembered who she was and the game changed." And indeed, it does. Because the woman who remembers her worth no longer begs for what she deserves. She embodies it. In one quiet story, a woman named Elena had been in a relationship for 7 years. She had sacrificed her career goals, her friendships, even parts of her identity to be who he needed. But when he left, she realized she had no idea who she was anymore. At first, she grieved deeply, but then, slowly, she started doing things she loved. Painting, traveling, journaling, dancing in her kitchen. And with every step, she remembered parts of herself she had abandoned. Years later, she didn't look back at the breakup with anger. She looked back with gratitude, because it was the catalyst that forced her to return to herself. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. But every relationship teaches. The ones that break you open often rebuild you stronger, wiser, more whole. Women who rise after heartbreak don't just rise. They transform. They no longer let emotional neglect masquerade as mystery. They no longer stay silent to keep the peace, because they understand that any peace that silences their truth is not real peace. They no longer entertain relationships that drain them. They become women who are full of life and only accept partners who come with full cups, not empty hands. In the end, the most powerful shift is when a woman stops asking, "Why won't he choose me?" and starts declaring, "I choose myself." Because self-love is not a trend, it's a lifeline, and the woman who returns to herself becomes a force of nature, not to be feared, but to be honored. In the world we inhabit, few forces are as quietly transformative as the presence of a woman who has mastered her own energy. She does not impose. She does not chase attention. She does not seek to overpower. And yet, when she enters a space, something changes. You may not be able to name it immediately. You may not even notice it consciously. But suddenly, people breathe deeper. Conflict softens. Tension disperses. Conversations become more authentic. It's as if the room remembers what it means to feel safe. This is not magic. It is not illusion. It is the lived reality of emotional regulation, one of the most overlooked but powerful aspects of human relationships. Neuroscience now confirms what wisdom traditions have always taught: the energy we carry affects the nervous systems of those around us. When we speak of energy, we are not referring to something mystical or vague. We are referring to presence, tone, intention, the silent language of the body, and the resonance of the heart. A woman who is surrounded by angels does not need to speak loudly to be heard. Her energy speaks first. Her emotional state becomes an anchor, just like the steady rhythm of a heartbeat regulates a child resting against their mother's chest. The emotional steadiness of a woman can calm even the most chaotic emotional environments if she has learned to master her own nervous system. One might think this type of inner grace is something people are simply born with, but it is cultivated. It requires choosing not to react when provoked. It requires holding yourself when no one else does. It requires learning how to return to center again and again, no matter how many times the world tries to pull you off balance. In relationships, this ability becomes a gift beyond words. The man who feels safe to be vulnerable. The child who learns emotional vocabulary through observation. The friend who trusts enough to unravel their fears. These are not outcomes of chance. They are the quiet results of consistent emotional regulation. There's a story of a woman named Amira. She worked in a high-pressure environment as a trauma nurse. The job exposed her to intensity every single day. Blood, fear, grief, urgency. Yet, her colleagues often said there was something different about her. When she's on shift, one said, the whole unit breathes easier. Another said, even the patients seem to suffer less when she's near. What they didn't see was what Amira practiced behind closed doors. Daily meditation, breathwork, journaling to process emotional residue, choosing not to carry other people's pain home with her. She guarded her energy not selfishly, but as a sacred responsibility. Her presence regulated the energy of others because she first learned how to regulate her own. Psychologists often use the term co-regulation to describe the unconscious synchronizing of emotional states between individuals. This is especially evident in parent-child relationships, but it happens in all close relationships. When one person in a room is calm and centered, it becomes easier for others to match that state. When someone is anxious or reactive, others may absorb that energy and reflect it back. A woman surrounded by angels understands this mechanism. She does not just focus on what she says. She focuses on the energy with which she says it. She knows that her silence can heal or harm. She knows that a look, a breath, a sigh can speak louder than words. This doesn't mean she never gets upset. Emotional regulation is not emotional suppression. It is not about pretending to be composed while suppressing rage or sorrow underneath. True regulation begins with awareness. She feels her emotions fully, but she does not allow them to hijack her decisions. She becomes the observer, the student of her own mind. When sadness arises, she sits with it like an old friend rather than push it away. When anger flares, she listens for the lesson underneath it. When joy arises, she allows it to fill the space without guilt or fear of losing it. She does not cling and she does not resist. She allows herself to flow. Have you ever been in the presence of someone who made you feel anxious without saying a word? Or someone whose calm made you feel instantly more grounded? This is the unseen world of emotional transmission. This is what we are speaking of when we say that some people regulate energy. A woman who understands her influence in this way begins to live more consciously. She notices when her tone becomes sharp. She notices when her body tightens in defense. She catches the moment when her mind drifts toward assumptions. And because she notices, she has the power to redirect. She replaces sharpness with clarity, tension with breath, assumption with curiosity. And here is where it becomes relationally profound. People trust her not because she always agrees with them, but because they feel emotionally safe in her presence. They know she won't explode without warning. They know she will not use silence as punishment or words as weapons. They know that if conflict arises, she will seek truth, not victory. That kind of presence builds trust faster than charm, words, or beauty ever could. In one of the oldest texts from the East, there is a phrase, "The wise woman is like water. She flows where needed, nourishes what is dry, and yields without weakness." This is emotional regulation. It is fluidity, not rigidity. It is the ability to remain connected to one's own center while still being deeply responsive to the needs and energies of others. This is not something society teaches women directly. In fact, society often rewards emotional volatility as passion or punishes sensitivity as weakness. But in truth, emotional mastery is strength beyond measure. A woman who understands this moves differently. She doesn't chase emotional highs. She doesn't panic during emotional lows. She watches. She listens. She moves from groundedness. The impact this has on romantic relationships is particularly powerful. Many men raised in environments that discouraged emotional expression carry unresolved emotional burdens. When they find a partner who does not judge their silence, who listens without rushing to fix, who holds space without fear, they begin to open. It's not therapy, it's trust. And trust, when built upon emotional safety, becomes the foundation of deep love. This woman doesn't force vulnerability. She creates the atmosphere where it becomes natural. There's a couple I once knew, married for over 3 decades. Their secret wasn't compatibility, though they differed in many ways. It wasn't even shared interests. What kept them bound together was the way the woman had cultivated emotional steadiness over the years. In times of financial hardship, she remained calm, offering solutions instead of blame. In moments of disagreement, she sought understanding instead of control. Her presence was a mirror, reflecting not just who her husband was, but who he had the potential to become. And because he felt seen, he chose her again and again. This doesn't mean she tolerated disrespect. Emotional regulation does not mean emotional self-sacrifice. In fact, it requires healthy boundaries. When a woman regulates energy, she becomes acutely aware of when her boundaries are being crossed, not from anger, but from clarity. And when she sets limits, they are not ultimatums, they are invitations for others to rise to her level. She does not yell to prove a point. She walks away to protect her peace. She does not try to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding her. She simply continues to walk in alignment with her values. Over time, this teaches others how to treat her. There is a Japanese phrase, shikataganai. It means, it cannot be helped. A woman who has cultivated emotional regulation knows when to act and when to release. She does not waste her energy trying to control what is beyond her. She focuses instead on the one place she always has power, herself. In parenting, this energy becomes a child's blueprint for emotional intelligence. Children do not learn how to process their emotions from instruction. They learn from observation. A daughter watches how her mother breathes through stress, how she responds to irritation, how she handles disappointment. A son learns not just what is acceptable in women, but what is admirable. And that understanding will shape how he treats women for the rest of his life. This woman is not perfect, but she is intentional. She reflects, she adjusts, she learns, and slowly she becomes the kind of woman who, when people describe her, they say, "When she is around, I feel more like myself." Such a woman may go unnoticed in crowds. Her power is quiet. It doesn't scream. But in a world addicted to noise, her silence becomes revolutionary. In a culture that prizes reaction, her restraint becomes wisdom. In relationships that are so often dominated by fear or control, her presence becomes an act of healing. And what does it take to become this kind of woman? It takes solitude, not loneliness, solitude. Time spent alone not to escape the world, but to understand your place in it. It takes self-honesty, the willingness to confront the patterns you carry, the wounds you've avoided, the tendencies you justify. It takes breath, deep, conscious breath, because the nervous system responds more to breath than to words. It takes choosing peace over being right. It takes forgiving, not because others deserve it, but because you deserve peace. It takes watching how your body feels when you're around certain people and trusting that feeling instead of dismissing it. It takes daily practices, not dramatic changes, but small, consistent rituals that bring you back to center. Drinking water with intention, walking without distraction, journaling what you feel instead of suppressing it. It takes surrender, not as giving up, but as giving in to the flow of life, trusting that when you tend to your inner state, your outer life cannot help but reflect it. There is no shortcut, there is no fast track, but there is a path. And every time a woman chooses to walk that path, not loudly, not for applause, but quietly, in integrity, she becomes the kind of presence that stabilizes the world around her, not by force, not by persuasion, but by example. There is a kind of power in stillness, a power that isn't silent because it is weak, but because it is deeply anchored. A woman who has learned to choose presence over performance offers something rarely a sacred pause in a world that never stops demanding more. She doesn't enter with noise, she enters with a quiet invitation. Presence is not the absence of action. It is the fullness of being. It is the breath in between words that carries the weight of a forest. It is the eye that sees without needing to fix. It is both sanctuary and threshold. This truth is ancient yet ever new. It's recorded in the stories of wise women who stood at the edge of mountains under the canopy of stars and claimed their place without shouting. Their presence was an altar, their silence a hymn. They understood that stillness is not an escape from life. It is the place where life is born again. When a woman becomes still enough to inhabit herself, she begins to notice the spaces around her shifting. In relationships, that stillness is contagious. It slows frantic hearts. It softens hardened defenses. It invites honesty where there was pretense, vulnerability where there was armor. Researchers call this the mirror principle, the idea that the people who show up in our lives reflect parts of us we must see and heal. The relationships we attract are not random, they echo what we carry inside. The mirror shows both our light and our shadows. The people we admire in others are often qualities we possess, but have yet to claim. The behaviors that trigger us in others often point to wounds we are still carrying within ourselves. Reddit. What I learned today. The Tribune. One woman shared that every passionate connection she had felt unsustainable. They began in fire and danced toward ruin. Calmness felt boring, even unsafe. But the moment she began tending to her inner rhythm, feeling what felt real instead of desperate, her outer world began to mirror that. She stopped attracting storms and instead found still lakes. It wasn't magic. It was transformation from the inside. Energy does not lie. Even a child senses when a room is unsettled. Even a partner senses the difference between a soul seeking permission and a soul at peace. She doesn't say everything, but she doesn't need to. Her emotional coherence speaks for her. Neuroscience shows how brains sync up, even unconsciously, through microexpressions, tone, and rhythm. Co-regulation is real, and when one person is calm, another can follow. A friend told me about Lila, who after years of restless dating, began practicing stillness. She didn't meditate because her life was perfect. She meditated because her life was messy, and she needed to come home to herself. She surrendered to silence before trying to force love again. Months later, when a man entered her life, not with chasing, but with curiosity, he felt her presence and responded in kind. She walked into the relationship already whole, and it shaped itself around her completeness, not her lack. Eastern wisdom describes this as Wu Wei, not doing, yet doing. Not passivity, but a power born from alignment. The woman who knows how to be still summons heaven, not by seeking it, but by allowing it to arrive. She does not demand divine favor. She becomes a vessel for it. Her stillness becomes relational soil where intimacy can root. So often, intimacy dies under the weight of over-explanation or frantic striving, but stillness invites realness. It whispers, I am here, let me feel you. And people respond to that. In long relationships, partners say they love her steady presence, even more than her laughter or her compassion. Because a steady heart is rare, it becomes a harbor. And when storms come, people remember where they found safe shore. Mirror neurons, our brain's innate tendency to copy what it sees. Activate this response. When someone is grounded, our nervous system steps down. It's why babies calm in their mother's chest. It's why a partner's steady breathing can soften panic in us. Presence can heal the nervous system, and through it, entire relationships. This doesn't mean stillness is easy. It means resisting the impulse to fill silence, to fix everything, to be liked. It means sitting with your fear, your impatience, your grief, and trusting that something tender is growing beneath that soil. One woman shared this. When I stopped trying to orchestrate love, love began to breathe for itself. She stopped texting hoping for replies. She stopped smiling for approval. She started being. And someone came and matched her frequency, not to chase but to stay. Our society often confuses business with worth. Yet, depth thrives in quiet. Stillness stretches awareness. Absence of movement is not absence of life. It is life breathing in its truest form. In relationships, this offers clarity. Connection built on presence is sustainable. Connection built on performance inevitably falters. There is a phrase, you don't attract what you want, you attract who you are. Presence is a form of being. It is love rooted in stability, not adrenaline. A stable woman doesn't attract storms. She doesn't settle for them. She invites alignment. Even when the world pushes her to perform, she retreats inward and asks, what does it feel like to calm this? To bridge this with quiet attention. Her response shapes reality. It shifts the energy of the room, the dynamic of the relationship, the tone of her life. Stories of lovers rediscovered in silence are common. Couples once drifting apart, who began sitting in quiet together again, no phones, no agenda, rediscovered tenderness. Not because they fixed their problems, but because they felt each other again. Stillness honors presence. Presence honors relationship. Relationship then becomes sacred, not transactional. She doesn't need to be seen as spiritual or wise. She only needs to be steady. That steadiness ripples outward. Children learn emotional maturity from her. Friends remember how to be honest. Partners learn how to love beyond chaos. Ancient teachers described stillness as the pearl within. Yet here's the nuance. You don't find the pearl by digging outward. You find it by sinking inward. Relationships aren't healed by more words. They're healed by quieter hearts. And yet, stillness is not absence of love. It is love that doesn't demand. It sees without needing to judge or fix. Disagreement becomes a conversation, not a competition. Space becomes safety, not distance. Mirror principle again, what you carry is what you meet. If you carry restlessness, you'll meet restlessness. If you carry attention, you'll be met with presence. If you carry stillness, even if unfamiliar, people will start to show up differently, if only because you've shifted the signal. This requires patience. The world moves faster than depth, but presence doesn't demand urgency. It asks only for being, moment by moment, breath by breath. Imagine walking into a relationship as someone already whole, as someone who knows. You do not ask for love, you offer it. You do not demand commitment, you show it. You do not manipulate trust, you emanate it. In that state, relationship becomes communion, not negotiation. It becomes altar, not contract. It becomes a mirror not of what's missing, but of what's been found. When a woman becomes aware of the quiet presence surrounding her, when she walks through life with grace, grounded in truth and aligned with the inner wisdom that neither shouts nor seeks validation, something remarkable happens. The world doesn't just see her, it feels her. Her energy is not loud, but it is undeniable. Her presence doesn't demand attention, but it commands respect. She is not guided by the noise of the outside world, but by the still voice within. She knows she is not alone. She is protected, elevated, and deeply connected. To be a woman surrounded by angels is not to live a life free from pain, but to rise in the presence of it. It is not to avoid betrayal or heartbreak, but to transform these trials into deeper discernment. It is not to be untouched by life, but to be as tuned into its higher meaning. She is not bitter, she is wiser. She is not closed, she is selective. She doesn't lower her frequency to be understood. She stays grounded in her light, and those meant for her rise to meet it. She does not strive to be liked by all. She seeks alignment with what is true, with what is sacred. And because she honors that alignment, life honors her in return. This woman may not always be seen in the spotlight. She may walk quietly, tend to her peace privately, and carry her joy without need for applause. But wherever she goes, people feel safer. They feel held even in silence. Not because she gives all her energy away, but because she has mastered the art of keeping what is essential. Her relationships are not rooted in fear or ego. They are reflections of the deep respect she has cultivated within herself. She speaks with intention. She listens without judgment. She loves without attachment. And yet her love is unforgettable. She is not desperate for affection. She is anchored in her own. This world needs more women who are grounded in this kind of strength, one born not from domination, but from deep remembrance. The remembrance that you are not here to chase, to beg, or to prove. You are here to embody the quiet power of knowing who you are and whose you are. That is the power of a woman surrounded by angels. And if you're listening to these words and something inside you is stirring, that soft knowing, that gentle ache, that rising stillness, it may not be a coincidence. It may be your moment to return home to yourself. Not someday, but now.